Welcome to the Paddock Pass podcast review show of the United Kingdom Grand Prix. We're sat here in the Silverstone Media Centre. As you can see behind us, the sun is finally going down. The clouds are still there because it's been somewhat of a blustery weekend. And goodness, what a dramatic one as well. Round 7 of MotoGP. Plenty to talk about. We're going to try to chew through most of it. I'm Adam Wheeler and I'm joined as ever by David and Neil. Dave, how are you feeling? Because you made a certain someone cry today. You came across as a bit of a bully, and it was quite shocking.
All I did was ask Fabio a question, Fabio Quartararo. I asked him if the fact he had such a fantastic race, had such fantastic pace, and despite the fact that his ride height device broke, I asked him whether that gave him hope for the future, and he started to answer my question and then completely lost it. And it was a very awkward moment, but it was also, I think because there were a lot of grown men standing around him who were also on the verge of tears. I will neither confirm nor deny that I was absolutely tearing up.
It was actually my moment of the Grand Prix because not wanting to pick through someone's woes, but it was emotion. It was that kind of spectacle that you kind of like to see in a sporting event. I mean,
it was pure. It was absolute. And afterwards, he gave us the absolutely purest quote that I've had. You know, like he was absolutely honest and pure about what it was like. He wasn't. You know, the PR speak was when he really. He opened his heart and spoke freely.
We'll talk a bit about Fabio in a moment, but Neil, have you bullied anyone today, or abused anyone, or taken advantage of anyone's feelings?
Well, Pete McLaren's here, so obviously him. Both of you are sitting fairly close to me in the media centre, so obviously there's that. But in terms of riders, I don't think so. Not like Dave.
So what was kind of your moment from this Grand Prix?
Well, my moment of the Grand Prix, there were many of them. I really did have to wade through quite a few to come to this decision. But my moment was Massimo Rivola's quote, I think, to Aprilia on the live just after Marco Bezzecchi took victory, which was something along the lines of, I hope this convinces Jorge Martin to stay. And it was just a kind of reminder that after this crazy, chaotic race where really you didn't know what was going to happen, then suddenly Marco Bezzecchi is leading it from the most unlikely of situations. It was easy to lose sight that this has been a rather turbulent fortnight for Aprilia, because it was around this time 2 weeks ago in France that we started hearing the murmurs of discontent from Jorge Martin and his camp. And what they've gone through in the subsequent 2 weeks, and then to come here and win in such dramatic circumstances, I think was, it was a pretty madcap end to Sunday.
Didn't Rivola, who's kind of the head of the Aprilia factory racing project, by the way, didn't he also intimate that this was like a bit of a sign as well, that the bike was capable? Because that seemed to be Martin's, alleged chief concern, is that the Aprilia won't be able to take him on to the results he kind of enjoyed with Ducati.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he's sitting at home just sort of like looking at the results sheet, and that's not always the reality. It's very different when you're actually riding. But yes, it was. He did also say, one swallow does not a summer make. So yes, it still needs work, but I mean, it was very, very clear. It meant a lot to everyone in Aprilia. That was really, really. I mean, I remember we walked into the just as they were taking down the Aprilia hospitality. We walked in there, and on the outside there was just a line of scattered Prosecco bottles, sort of laying all over the floor.
That sweet aroma as well.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly. Yeah. Poor Vicky, the PR, the press officer, was up here with, I think, with Savadori, and there was wafts of Prosecco coming off of her.
We, as ever, on the Paddock Pass podcast, we like to invite questions and queries from our patrons and loyal listeners. And we've been putting our Paddock Note shows up for free for everybody to enjoy on that platform across the weekend. So if you want to retrospectively go and check out what happened at Silverstone in this round 7, then go and have a look on our patreon.com/Paddock Pass podcast channel, and you'll see and hear some of our broadcasts and podcasts that we record every single day there. We had a query in from Yekok. I hope I said that correctly. Probably not.
Koki. It's Koki backwards, isn't it?
No, was it?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
I've just realised.
Okay, good. That's very cryptic.
Yeah.
How likely is it that this is a real turning point for Aprilia and Bez? We know it's been a good track for Aprilia. Why is that, Neil?
Well, we know that it's one of the more agile bikes on the grid. The character of the RSGP has always been like a sort of a big 250 in that it goes really well through fast-flowing corners and fast-flowing tracks. And, you know, its record at Silverstone is kind of unparalleled. I mean, it's been Aprilia's track really in the last 4 to 5 years. They scored their first 4-stroke podium here in 2021 with Alicia Spargo. Maverick came close to winning in 22. Alicia won here in 23, and then he was on the podium here last year in the sprint. So, you know, this is the best track on the calendar for Aprilia, along with probably Barcelona. And yeah, it can just take advantage of the wideness of the track. It can run sort of fast, low, wide sweeping lines, and it has like pretty good top speed overall. So yeah, this is maybe not the best place to judge whether they've made massive progress, because they've been strong here in the last couple of years. But yeah, it was just nice to see Bezzecchi showing his true talent. And I mean, you have to remind ourselves that he had a really terrible qualifying. He had a shocking start to the sprint race yesterday. He was down in 19th at one point? 19th, and came through to 4th. So, you know, there was hints in that occasion on Saturday that he had the potential to potentially be on the podium. But then to kind of put that race together today, okay, he got massively fortunate. Fabio Quartararo having to retire from the lead. But
a podium would have still been good.
Exactly, yeah. And, you know, I think that it's been a tough year for Aprilia so far, and there's probably been a couple of races where Bezzecchi's potential hasn't quite been realised. So this was a weekend where everything just kind of came together. And, yeah, I'm not sure if this is a definitive sort of turning point or a kind of a real sign of where they're at, because this has always been a great track for them, but a much-needed morale boost in light of the kind of troubling circumstances surrounding the factory.
Yeah, it's not just that this plays to the strengths of the Aprilia, it also minimises the weaknesses, because the biggest problem with the Aprilia is vibration and instability going into corners on the brakes in strong braking. Not very many places where you're really strong braking here. So you've got a bike which is really fast through the fast corners, and there's not very many places where it would actually like suffer. So it helps a lot. But I mean, in Lorenzo Savadori's debrief was interesting, because he was saying like, this is really much more of the potential of the bike. This is showing the potential much more, because what you were seeing in what you've seen before is that Bezzecchi was showing lots and lots of pace. There were lots of places where, if you look at his paces, he's as fast as the front guys, but he just couldn't put the whole package together. So, you know,
and
like
can't qualify.
Yeah, couldn't qualify. He'd be stuck somewhere, would make a mistake, would run off, whatever. This was a place where everything came together, and he could show what the bike was truly capable of. I do think that it is very much a case, as Massimo Rivola said, you know, one swallow doesn't make a summer. This is a good track for Aprilia. This is what this Aprilia RSGP and Marco Bezzecchi is capable of doing at a track like this. There's going to be tracks where it's going to be terrible.
Yeah, I mean, Bezzecchi has been hit and miss so far, but we mustn't forget that, you know, he's in his first season with the Aprilia, and that change. I mean, it's a situation, say, that Enea Bastianini has not been able to get his head around really at KTM, how to try and eke the best of a different machine and put the performance parameters on the track. But I think also when it comes to the Italian, we have to consider the fact that he's carrying the team by himself. You know, the whole mess around Martin has to have been a little bit of a distraction, however much he denies it. He says, I'm focusing on myself. You know, that whole kind of drama going on around him has to have some sort of impact. And I think also that, you know, Bezzecchi's a good rider, but I mean, I was even moved to sort of ask Massimo Rivola if, you know, he was surprised that this win came early, because, you know, we hadn't really seen podium potential before from Bezzecchi, but everything, like you say, Dave, just came to sort of align perfectly for him.
I think the Martin situation could actually be quite good for Bezzecchi, because you've got one side of the garage where it seems as though the trust is a little bit broken from the rider's side. You get the impression that he's not best pleased with Aprilia. We are expecting some kind of reaction to come from Martin in the coming days. We've heard from certain people close to his camp that there might be a response posted. The relationship is definitely frayed there. There's no doubt about that. There doesn't seem to be much contact between the two camps, from Rivola's words and some of the words of Aprilia's press team, just in how they worded it. You know, it was kind of like, we hope that Jorge Martin could see this and could, you know, take some evaluation. It's not like they're in kind of contact and he's sending them celebratory texts saying, well done, guys. And that's not the impression you got anyway. Whereas Bezzecchi's just able to be here, have his head down and say, look, I'm fully committed to this. And, I'm the one that should be leading this forward. I mean, he's been doing it pretty much all season because Jorge's been out injured.
But there's a deadline, isn't there, Neil? I mean, this Aprilia All-Stars event in Misano next week means, that Martin is going to have to show up in a promotional duty for Aprilia, and that is obviously going to have, I don't know, some sort of coming together, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a massive thing. It's like World Ducati Week, but for Aprilias. And so, yes, it's a massive promotional thing. There's going to be sort of thousands of Aprilia fans there. There's going to be thousands of, there's going to be all
top management.
The top management are going to be there. And as Neil was saying, yes, it does look really, I mean, the way that Rivola was speaking about, or Rivola was speaking about Martin, you really felt there was a massive gaping chasm between the two of them. There was a really, really big gap there. And I think also what I felt with, he also said that when you asked him that question about Bezzecchi, he said, yeah, no, Bezzecchi's completely behind this project, and he made a little video to send to the team and tell everyone that they're all working really hard and they really appreciate it.
Yeah, and I think you just have to look at the wider context of Aprilia's season and one or two of the reasons why it hasn't been going so well. Martin out for the majority of the season, Agura out injured here, and a rookie as well. Raul missed a good chunk of pre-season. I mean, they have been kind of...
he was critical. Rivola was very critical of Raul, or very critical for the first
surprising.
time.
Surely not, after such a brilliant run of performances.
But it's been the first time, yes. I mean, normally we've been waiting for him to explode, and he seems to accept that the Raul Fernandez was a non-explosive device.
Although he did top warm-up this morning, so there is always that.
Taka Nakagami Cup.
Yeah.
There
you go.
And just very briefly on Bezzecchi, it is worth reminding ourselves that this is a guy that at the end of 2023 opted not to take a seat at Pramac in 2024 on the GP24 and instead say in VR46 on the GP23, which is obviously so much less competitive than the GP24. I mean, the guy kind of torched his own career, had a pretty terrible 2024, and it was his own choice. It was his own loyalty to Valentino Rossi that completely became his undoing, and he hasn't quite been the same rider since that 2023, the end of 2023. When he was fighting for the championship up until the last couple of races. So yeah, his first win since India 2023, and a reminder that when things play out in his way, that he can take advantage.
Unlike the guy who was next to him on the podium, I don't think this is a bit of a transformational result. I mean, also like you two were saying, I can't see Bezzecchi suddenly going on and winning in Aragon. And then, Mugello's got some fast corners. He could be competitive there. I don't think this is the start of a great new era.
No, but I think it will help move the project forward a little bit. I think it will give Bezzecchi a lot more confidence. Also, just to put like a whole program together. The thing is, he can't put a weekend together. That's been his biggest problem. And I think that this sort of thing gives the confidence to start better, to qualify better, to do all of those other things better that are going to result in just basically being a little bit further forward. And that increases, just being further forward, increases the likelihood of a repeat.
I want to talk a bit about Silverstone later, but the stage where we were today, I mean, the fact that you two are both sitting here wearing big fleeces and looking like extras out of the film The Revenant is a bit of a clue towards the temperatures and some of the chilly wind here. And it did play a part in shaping this race, right, Dave? I mean, especially because of the drama we had at the beginning. Ride height devices is something else we'll touch on, but, tyre choice and the way that riders had to deal with front tyre pressures and also just, tyre consumption with the chilly wind. This is the earliest this British Grand Prix or the UK Grand Prix has been while we've been at Silverstone. So all of this sort of created this swirl of, slight unpredictability about the Grand Prix.
Yeah, I mean, look, in the end of the decision, the Grand Prix the result came down to who was brave enough to run the soft front. Because the soft front, when we saw the list of, they're running the soft front, I'm not sure that's going to make it, because there were doubts from yesterday whether people could actually make the soft last.
Yep.
But look at the top. Well, apart from Marc, most of the top there would have been 3 riders on the podium if Fabio's ride height device hadn't gone on. And even Alex Marquez was saying, like, he decided to choose the medium. But afterwards, he said, "I should have chosen the front." He chose the medium because he felt he was worried about the last laps. The problem was you had more grip for most of the race. It was a safer option, but the last 4 or 5 laps you ended up with graining, and if you have too much graining, which is basically degradation of the right side of the tyre, then you don't know if you can actually get to the end. You start to lose turning, and you start to really lose time.
Yeah, I think the majority of the field were on the soft front in the sprint, and they noticed there was quite considerable graining, maybe with the exception of Yamaha, towards the end of the sprint. And I think Piero Taramassa from Michelin said no one had done anywhere near a full race distance on the soft front because there was 3 different tyre compounds to try on the front this weekend. And obviously some of the sessions were a bit affected by weather as well. So yeah, it was a step into the unknown, but it quickly became apparent in the race that that was certainly the front tyre to be on. Bezzecchi, Zarco, Quartararo, Miller were at the top 4 at one point, and they were all running it. And it was absolutely remarkable to see. I'm sure we'll come on to this a bit later, but it was just remarkable to see a top 4 up front of a MotoGP race in the dry without any Ducatis there.
Pecco Bagnaia was saying that he believed Alex Marquez would have won this race with one hand behind his back, if it hadn't been for the crash into turn 1, which clearly was a fault of the ride height device and also maybe slightly quicker entry. It was a major gaffe, and then Marc Marquez crashing out of the lead the following lap. I mean, we were sitting here watching this thinking, what on earth is going on? It was quite dramatic, and then suddenly to have 2 Yamaha M1s going 1-2. Yeah. And then Dave, I think you were saying there were 3 Hondas.
3 Hondas in the top 10 at one point, which have been I've no idea when the last time was there were 3 Hondas in the top 10, but it's got to have been certainly pre-2019, and probably even before that, probably when Danny was still on the bike.
Dave, just quickly on the subject of tyres, a listener, Yanni Valtoven, said, when was the last time it looked like the teams were prepared for 2 different race tyres, and why is the cold temperatures so critical with tyre choice? But this is a little bit of a scenario we see at Phillip Island.
Yes, exactly. It was really reminiscent of Phillip Island, where also, because Silverstone, like Phillip Island, which is one of the glories of the layout, it's really fast and it's really demanding. It's demanding because of the speed and because you're on the side of the tyre a lot, and so you're using a lot of the tyre. So really, what you want is something quite hard, but we're on basically sort of on the top of a hill, and the wind comes in. It's a former airbase. It's still, I think, an active airfield. The wind comes in and it blows across it blows across. It's very cold. It sucks all of the heat out of the tyres, and so you need as soft a tyre as possible to be able to keep the grip, to keep the turning. But then you go soft and you're caught between 2 fires. You need something which will last, but you also need something with a lot of grip and which won't wear too much. So it's really, really difficult.
After the race, Neil, I think social media fans voted for the rider of the day. I mean, it was very clear, Fabio Quartararo. And
forget that our Paddock Pass podcast patrons voted for him as the rider of the day as well. 58% of
58?
them.
Only 58%?
Yeah, that's a bit surprising.
I'm disappointed.
I mean, Quartararo, this should have been his first Grand Prix win since the summer of 22.
Yeah.
I think Sachsenring was the last Grand Prix he won. I mean, that's 3 long years. I mean, we've attended so many media debriefs in this time, listening to Fabio air his frustrations, his sadness, his general air of resignation with Yamaha's project, and he's stuck by them. Admittedly, he's getting paid a lot, but he's decided to sort of re-up with Yamaha. He did last year, and it's working out. I mean, I thought he was brilliant again this weekend, not just today.
No, I mean, I spoke to a couple of people at Yamaha this weekend, and they were very positive. And again, my moment of the weekend, which you forgot, Adam, was I went.
You just have to butt in sometimes.
Yeah,
Dave.
I know I
sorry.
do. Well, which is why I'm butting in now. After the race, I went to get a sandwich, and the people behind the serving counter there were sort of 3 young women, and they were clearly didn't know very much about motorsports, but they all were saying, what happened to the bloke at the front? What happened to the bloke at the front? So I sort of explained a little bit about the background, that it had broken down and that it was because they'd seen him, the pictures of him crying and everything. And every time I explained to them sort of like what happened, they were going, oh, that's sad. Oh, that's terrible. Oh, the poor thing. And I think that was like the general feeling throughout the paddock. Everyone felt that. Even the other riders were saying, oh, that's cruel. That's really, really harsh. Everyone really, really felt for Fabio Quartararo.
Yeah, because it was such a magnificent ride, and it was. You have to say it was quite surprising because he obviously took a brilliant pole position on Saturday, but the sprint was not ideal. Really struggled with tire wear towards the end of the sprint race, and said that just the Yamaha is so critical. It really amplifies if there's any sort of difference in grip. The Yamaha seems to feel it a lot more than the other machines on the grid, and his mood was really quite low, quite angry, I felt, on the Saturday. So then to see him jump into a lead of 2.4 seconds after 2 laps, it was just like, okay, Fabio was absolutely on one. You thought, is he maybe pushing his front tire a bit too much? Bezzecchi got into second. I think there was one point when Bezzecchi set the fastest lap of the race. Fabio immediately responded again the next time around. So he was controlling that gap. And it was, it was going to be an absolutely sensational textbook win, a kind of a rich reward for this kind of brilliant amount of effort that Yamaha has put in over the last 18 months. 3 pole positions on the trot. He probably would have been up fighting for the podium in Le Mans had it not rained. This has been building, and for him not to be rewarded was so cruel over such a freak kind of mechanical mishap.
Yeah, Fabio Quartararo is riding at an incredible level at the moment. He's just perhaps some of the best I've seen him in a long time, certainly since his championship year. And like I said, I talked to a couple of senior Yamaha figures, and they all said the same thing. Fabio is riding so well, so good. This is the best that they've seen. And they get to see him sort of close up, and they get to see sort of like what he's really doing. And he's just... I think also because he can see the progress that the project is making, he can see that the bike is getting better, and that has really motivated him, and he's riding back where he can be. This is the Fabio Quartararo, who's earning the whatever it is, the 10 or 12 million that he's getting a year.
I mean, Yamaha are bubbling nicely, aren't they? I mean, this time last year, Quartararo would have paid a lot of that salary just to get a Q2 entry.
Yes.
And now we have 3 pole positions in a row, and 3 pretty sort of different tracks, different conditions as well. I think it's really promising for what they could do later in the season.
3 Yamahas straight through to Q2 as well.
Yeah, and it could have been 4 at one point.
Yeah.
Miguel Oliveira was actually threatening to get into Q2 automatically on the Friday as well, which showed you right across the board they were strong here. And it was interesting. We saw shots of Tom Orban, his best friend and kind of minder and personal manager, I think, as well now, speaking to him, opening his helmet and reaching in and kind of shouting in his face and telling him. Asked Fabio about this afterwards, and he just said it was similar to Jerez 2019 when he was fighting for victory for the first time in MotoGP. Had the gear lever break on his bike and retired. And that day, I remember Tom screaming at Fabio saying, this is the start of something. This is going to happen again and again and again. Do not think this is a single event. And I think Tom was saying something similar to Fabio today. This is not going to be a one-off, Fabio. You've shown in the last couple of races that Yamaha are getting back to the front of MotoGP, and that is just hugely encouraging.
There was plenty going on after the race, but Dave, you popped down to the Yamaha pit box and you managed to grab some time with team manager Meregalli, and he not only gave a reaction to the race, but also gave some interesting little news. So we're going to roll ahead with that audio now.
We were really disappointed for him first, and then also for us because it was not expected. We really never happened a problem with the rear start device.
Is it difficult because the start devices add so much complexity to the motorbikes? There's so many pipes going everywhere because you're not allowed to use electronics, so everyone is using hydraulics to do the same thing. Is it natural that it fails because they're so complicated?
In this moment, we really don't know. They took the place away, and then they will investigate. So we don't know exactly what happened. And also, all the parts of the bike are mileage, but it was even not in the middle of the mileage. So it's really, really strange. And it's really, yeah, you can imagine pity because the way that he was leading the race, also managing, we did not expect, and we were all gutted.
Yeah, exactly. This is a confirmation of the project. This is really a confirmation that the new direction you took, 2 years ago, the plan is starting to work.
Yeah, I think triple position in a row, especially beating the lap record of the last 3 circuits, for sure is a sign that the work is starting being fruitful. But we are also realistic that we have a lot of work again in front of us to do, and also especially managing the race. For me, what is able Fabio in doing the pole position is also because he's riding alone, and he really can exploit the most of all the little part of our bike. Battling with the others, as we always said, that for us is difficult. Difficult because okay, we are still missing some horsepower. The line are different. Sometimes, if you want to protect the line, basically you ruin your corner.
Yeah.
And then
Then you lose on exits.
Exactly. Then the other overtake you. So it's not easy. But the way that Fabio today rode the race was, yeah, he did his own lines, pushing, and he said that he had the great feeling since the beginning. He understood where he could force because of the wind, where he had to manage. It's just disappointing as how we ended up.
You've had 3 poles at 3 very different circuits. You're leading here now. Maybe this track suits the Yamaha a little bit more, but as I said to Fabio when he came for his debrief, this must give you hope that there are other tracks where you can do this again.
Yeah, yesterday I had this same question, and I thought that maybe, basically I was asked where we could eventually win.
Yeah.
And I thought that maybe Sepang was a track where we could. Here, I knew that, we know that it's quite good this circuit for us, but I could not expect. For me, it was also consequence of okay, maybe the medium tire the other use front was not the right choice. I think we did everything well, but sometimes you have to have also some luck.
This result, does it change the plan in terms of bringing when you bring the new V4, if you bring the new 4, or is it still the same?
No, it won't change. We are working in parallel. Soon we might stop developing this bike and start really putting all the effort in the new project. Next week, after Aragon, we will have 2-day test in Barcelona where we will evaluate. We will work on both bikes. Pramac team will keep working on this, and then we will have a testing team working with both. So we are developing both, and the fact that we are performing well, we will just try to bring there what we are learning and from the current bike to the other one.
Okay, thank you, and good luck next time.
Thank you.
One other issue we have to talk about, Dave. I know you want to get your teeth into this, probably just as much as maybe spectator numbers, which we can also mention again later. But the ride height devices. Yeah. It's a contentious subject, and it's been a polemic one and a controversial one for a couple of years now. We know their time is effectively limited with 2027 coming up, but we saw their influence and their effect quite prominently on the race today.
Yeah, exactly. Multiple occasions we saw Alex Marquez having to brake too hard to try to release his front whole shot divide braking into turn one on a medium tyre when it's cold. That was basically the reason he crashed out. We saw Fabio Quartararo basically, he had to stop because his ride height device was it wasn't stuck down. What was happening was it had some kind of leak, and there's exactly the same thing that happened to Alex Rins. He had exactly the same issue. So what was happening was the rear of the bike was dropping down, and he tried and brake to try to release it to get it to pop back up again. Because what's supposed to happen is there's some really complicated hydraulic pressure lines that once you pop it past a relief valve, and then it reinflates the rear of the bike, if you like, and it pops and the rear comes back up again. But there was a leak somewhere, so that it would sort of like come up and then sort of sag back down again, like one of those.
This is exactly why the Japanese were hesitant in bringing this,
yes.
and they were slower than Ducati because they were afraid of issues like this.
Yes, yeah, exactly. But they had to, because you're gaining, like in a straight, you're gaining 2 or 3 tenths because you're accelerating so much harder. I mean, one of the reasons the Ducati is so fast is because it can drop the rear of the bike and get much more drive. This is where a lot of the advantage of the Ducati is coming from. Is just being able to exploit the vehicle dynamics of a much lower center of gravity.
Well, Marc Marquez said it made them easier to ride as
Yeah,
well.
I mean, Marc Marquez was quite interesting. Overall, because we've had them for so long, for 5 years, a lot of riders have never known riding a MotoGP bike without them. But because they sort of drop the rear, they also make the bike more stable in the wind, for example. So it was that. And riders they're fairly positive about. I mean, I absolutely detest them and cannot wait for them to be gone, because it's the ride height devices which also cause a lot of the issues with the tyre overheating, because they also change the way that you brake. They change the dynamic of braking as well. They allow you to brake later because the rear of the bike is lower. They really change everything about riding, and I think it also does detract. The riders aren't having to control wheelie anymore. You load the you press the button on corner end or just before corner entry. You wait for the system to automatically drop the rear on exit, and you can just accelerate. There's no wheelie because of that, and it's enormous faff for the mechanics, because if you see these systems, you can see the one at the front of the Ducati. It's sort of in the nose. In Yamaha, it's in the tail, which sort of gave you an interesting question. Was it perhaps because it was so cold or something? Did that have an effect on it? But yeah, if something breaks, they've got to make sure that, or if there's a crash, they've got to make sure that all of these lines are, routed correctly, and that they're all connected correctly, and they've got to get it out of the way and make sure it's not rubbing against anything and it hasn't come loose. And it's an extra nightmare, which doesn't add anything to the racing, because it doesn't change. Well, the only thing that it does is make the racing more boring.
Yeah, it adds nothing to the spectacle other than making MotoGP look like just, little dragster bikes. And yeah, I agree with you, Dave, that 2027 can't come around soon enough with this regard. It was interesting hearing some riders saying that they're going to lobby in the Safety Commission next time out in Aragon to maybe have certain tracks on the calendar where we don't use the start device, because
Le
were saying Le Mans is just completely impractical to try and have to release the start device when you're braking into turn 3 there with angle. And they were saying that this place maybe is not as critical as Le Mans, but also presents its problems, because last year we had a couple of issues with, I think, Franco Morbidelli and Marco Bezzecchi on the grid here, trying to, one of them hit the other one because they couldn't get the start device released. And yeah, I mean, maybe it wouldn't be a terrible thing if we just got rid of them at every track.
Well, I think I can see that there's a case for actually banning the front whole shot devices. You could do that relatively easy, because what the front does is it locks the front forks down, so you've also got no more travel in the forks to actually absorb bumps. So if you're braking into somewhere, then you've used up all the travel, and if you can't release it, then that causes all sorts of problems. You could still start with the rear down, because if the rear gets stuck down, you've just got horrible geometry. You're riding a chopper and the thing doesn't want to turn. That's okay. That's much easier to deal with than when the front is locked down, and you wouldn't need to brakes quite so hard it would be less of a disaster if the rear gets locked down when you're braking into a corner. So I could make a case, and I could see that the GPC, the Grand Prix Commission, could say, you know what, let's get rid of, if we're getting rid of them anyway, might as well get rid of the whole shot devices for 2026, see how that changes, and then it's all gone in 27.
What's the realistic possibility that they go before the end of the year or next year?
Ride height devices 0, whole shot devices before the whole shot devices, I don't know, 10-15% maybe. There's definitely a chance, and I think the conversation is starting to happen, and I think also Ducati would be absolutely against it, but it would be acceptable if it was just the front whole shot and not the whole ride-out device until 2027.
As soon as you start waving and saying safety, then things get a little bit more complicated. It's hard to do that with the rear ride height, but then...
because the other thing, I mean, exactly as Mark said, it's also a safety addition in really windy conditions because the bike is low and it doesn't get moved around about.
Yeah, very true. The Paddock Pass podcast is brought to you by Renthal. If you have a street bike and you're after some accessories, some new bars, grips, clip-ons, some flywheels, then head to renthal.com and use the Fit My Bike option to find exactly what you need to fit the motorcycle that you have. Pole Position Travel as well help us this year. If you're after a trip and you want a small discount to a Grand Prix or a World Superbike round, then head to polepositiontravel.com and use the code PPOD25X. Thanks for listening to us. You'll be able to get a small discount and enjoy a first-class experience with the Pole Position Travel guys.
Also, I will be doing every year I do a talk for Pole Position at Assen. So if you go along to the Assen, I can bore you.
So there you go, everybody. Assen is the race to miss, but I'm sure there's lots of other ones on the calendar that you could check out. I'm only joshing Dave there. Don't want to slight you too much. Ducati. We were very close for a moment there when Jack Miller was running top 3 to not having a Ducati podium finisher.
Yeah.
Well, until Quartararo retired, we were going to have the first podium without a Ducati since 2021 at this circuit at Silverstone, which was...
sequence of over 70 races, Dave.
I think it would have been 72 races.
It was 72 races. This one, Marc Marquez made it 73 races in a row that there's been a Ducati on the podium.
Why were they not competitive here? I mean, why were they not filling 4 of the first 5 positions?
I mean, it was, I think, a combination of factors. As Pecco Bagnaia said, had Alex Marquez not had that massive mistake going into the first turn, he probably would have been able to win this race and maybe win it comfortably, although you have to imagine it would have been quite an interesting fight with him and Fabio Quartararo up at the front. So Alex was obviously lacking a bit of confidence when he restarted the race. Marc Marquez said he felt fantastic in the first race, but then crashed out going through the Maggots-Beckett's complex and was kind of a bit puzzled as to what had happened. And at that time, we were thinking, goodness, it's his 3rd DNF on a Sunday in 7 races. I mean, this is a pretty high DNF count for Marquez and what's supposed to be his invincible campaign. So when he restarted the race, he was obviously lacking quite a bit of confidence. And I think Fabio definitely sensed that, knew it was his time to attack from the off. But then we just saw... Bagnaia, they were obviously on the medium front, which wasn't the ideal front tyre to be on. They didn't feel the soft front tyre was an option. They just really seemed to be so uncomfortable. And Mark was making the point that they have to understand what exactly went on between the first race and the second, because aside from lacking a bit of confidence, he said the feeling was a complete disaster in the second outing, and there were so many moments for him. I mean, he did a fantastic job to finish the race, never mind finish 3rd and fight off Franco Morbidelli, Alex Marquez, who were advancing towards the end. The amount of like crazy front end moments he was having through turn 9.
Yeah, Stowe as well was
Cops
scary.
corner, like there was one moment where he was off the bike, basically ran off track, and both him and Bagnaia went off track, and it was like, what is going on here? I mean, I have to say, it was really cool to see a race without any Ducatis fighting towards the front. I was thinking, this is what we want the MotoGP. We've lacked this for the last 2 or 3 years. And then, obviously, they came back into it towards the end, and there was a really nice 3-way fight for the podium at the end. But, it once again gave you the impression that perhaps what Marc Marquez has been doing in the first 6-7 rounds of this season has been masking the fact that this GP25 is maybe a considerable step backwards.
Pecco Bagnaia, Dave, the second Grand Prix in a row, doesn't take any points on the ground. I mean, I said to him in his media debrief, what is Gigi Dall'Igna and also, senior management, whoever, Christian Gabarini, what are these people saying to him to give him some sort of assurance that they can turn this thing around? Because, we even also have listeners. I mean, Michael Alley, Gray Lunsford, Ubda Mack and Leon Biggs say, when is the GP25 going to be better than the GP24? Because Ducati have made evolutions every year with the basic architecture and philosophy of this model. And it seems like they've got it wrong because their star riders are not making it look as easy as they should.
No, exactly. What it looks like Ducati, because if you look at the Ducati from the outside, it looks identical or virtually identical to the GP24. Like, genuinely, in previous years, you've always been able to pick up sort of like, small details. This one, you really have to look to be able to see the difference. What it looks like they've done is they've wanted to make one or two changes, and then they've tried to keep everything else the same. The trouble is that a motorbike is, those little puzzles where you're pushing the squares around, and then if you get it all right, then you get a picture. It's a bit like one of those. So to actually move one piece, you've then got to move sort of 67 or 100 other pieces and moves to get back to where you started from.
Is he getting all philosophical again now?
I think he's about to drop some more poetry.
I'm not gonna. I'm not quite. But so you can't just change one thing. I mean, this is what I love about motorcycles. They're so complicated. They are so. They're a living organism. They're not just something you put together. It's not engine, frame, wheels. That'll do. It's so much more complicated, and that is what they've run into. They've made a few changes because they wanted to achieve something, and that has upset the bike in ways that they don't understand. And probably what's happening is when the engineers look at the data, all the lines look exactly the same. But to a rider, they're saying, I can't feel the front. I've got no idea what's going on. I could be riding a three-wheeler or a trike or a scooter. We heard from Pecco Bagnaia saying he couldn't tell the difference between the soft and the hard front tyre. He had no idea what it was. That's terrible.
Yeah, that is an insane thing to say. And Pecco was saying, I think it was in Jerez, that his two strongest corners there last year were the fast rides at the end of the lap through turns 11 and 12. This year when he went there, those were the kind of areas where he was losing the most amount of time. And, Silverstone is just filled with really fast open corners. You just thought this is going to be a bit of a nightmare for him. And so it proved. I mean, he did get quite unlucky in Le Mans with some of the things that happened, but this was just a disaster of a weekend from start to finish. And it wasn't surprising to see him crash out down at Luffield. He was already outside the top 10 after a couple of very near moments. It's starting to look quite insurmountable. 72 points back. Okay, we're only 7 rounds into the championship with 15 to go. But 72 points when you're trailing Marc Marquez by that extent, it's you do not want to be in that position.
It's even starting to look a little haphazard. I mean, Franco Morbidelli said he had an amazing race. I think he was describing the sort of frantic nature of it rather than as a sort of an entertainment spectacle. Of course, he had a prang with his best buddy on track, Aleix Espargaro. Aleix didn't want to thump him on the side of the helmet this time, but you can see them having choice words. I think we actually had a question about that. Mike Cross and Graham Barton were saying, what caused the Frankie and Aleix handbags? The crash was only on like a CCTV angle. It wasn't too clear.
Yeah, you couldn't see it. Aleix held his hand up afterwards and said it was my fault. I was trying to leave him space and I lost the front and wiped him out.
But there's history.
There is a mysterious weekend for Ducati. But then moving on to Aragon, I mean, Mark won there on a GP23 last year. You think, low grip track, maybe things could revert a little bit more towards the status quo that we have in MotoGP. Let's hope not. Let's talk about Johann Zarco for a moment. 2 podiums in a row. How can we explain this, Dave? I mean, we even have questions again from listeners. Graham Barton, Adam Cole, Highside Specialist, asking, why is Zarco Honda's best rider?
It's an interesting one. Technically, I don't know. Who was it? Somebody sort of hinted that I think Jean Mir said, Jean's got something on his bike which I wanted to try, but it was wet this morning in warm-up, so I couldn't. He is better able to handle the chatter in long corners. He'll just hang on and let it happen, which takes a certain mindset. And he's just, I think he's just in a good headspace. I think he's just, confident, concentrated, calm, and that is what is making the difference. Just pure confidence.
Yeah, I think we saw his ability. Zarco's always been fantastic at managing his tyres, especially his rear tyre. He's got excellent throttle control. We saw that in the sprint race yesterday when he came through to fifth with a really splendid ride. One of the guys to. I think he was the only Honda rider to run the soft front, so that obviously put him at a bit of an advantage. He got quite fortunate as well, actually, with the red flag coming out, because I think he had made a bit of a mess of his original start. I think he was back off both of the factory bikes, but then
didn't stop him in France, Neil.
Didn't. Yeah, but then he absolutely nailed it the second time around. There was something he said in yesterday's debrief after the sprint, which I thought was quite quite intelligent. Just showed that sort of maturity that he has, that experience as well. I think he's the oldest rider on the grid, the most experienced rider on the grid. And he said, having followed Marco Bezzecchi past him in Kota, and he said when Bezzecchi is in his rhythm, there's no point even trying to fight with him. And I kind of learned that the hard way in Kota. And he said when Bezzecchi came past him yesterday, he just tried to hang on in there, and basically, he towed him away from the rest. And he did the same thing today. He thought there was no point trying to run with him. I didn't have the speed of him. Yet Bezzecchi was able to pull him away from that kind of crazy fight just behind him with Mark, Miller, Alex, Frankie, all of those guys. So, just a super solid weekend. Fifth in the sprint, second in today's race. The first time that Honda have had back-to-back podiums since the end of 2021. I think that was Aragon and Misano, just before Mark then crocked himself training and had that diplopia problem once again. And he's just he's excellent. I mean, I kind of made this point after Le Mans, but you've got the two Marquez brothers this year that have been the standout names, and Quartararo doing amazing things on the Yamaha. But if you look at the rest of the field, I'm sort of thinking Zarco is the guy that's performing at the next highest level. Yep. And for him to be in that kind of top 4, top 5 is a remarkable thing at this kind of stage in his career.
We kind of thought he was underperforming with the best bike on the grid, but he's in theory taken one of the worst bikes on the grid and, is picking up more silverware.
Yeah, but I think, again, so much of this is about motivation, the correct motivation, because I've said before and I keep on saying, we all remember what he was like in KTM and how his head just went completely to pieces. And I think that was such a formative experience for him. And then also spending a year on the crappy Ducati, I think in 2020. That again, worst bike on the grid, worst team in the grid, and yet he worked his way through and had some really incredible performances. He could have stayed with Pramac. He could have had another year with Pramac, but he chose to go to Honda to do something different, to challenge himself. And he has approached this with an incredible maturity. This, to me, is what's most impressive about it. It's just his maturity, his ability to stay calm. Because occasionally you've seen like flashes when things have gone horribly wrong, that you can see him wanting to lash out, but he's holding himself in, saying, no, there's no point. It won't gain you anything.
Yeah, and our patrons have had the chance to listen to an interview I did with Christophe Bourguignon, the technical director of LCR, back in Kota. That was up on our Patreon page recently. But he was saying, I was asking, has Zarco improved in terms of how emotional he is? Because we know he's an emotional guy. We saw that, several instances during his time at KTM. And he said he is still extremely emotional. He does still explode in the garage with kind of regularity. However, he is very good at sort of dusting himself down after a few minutes, coming back into the garage and saying, sorry, guys, I was maybe a bit emotional, got a little bit out of line there, but, let's talk about it. Let's work through this, So he still has that sort of, and I think that, to be honest, the way Christophe was talking about it, he kind of appreciates that. You put all of this effort, you put all of this, your entire life basically goes into this kind of thing. And if things don't go well, it's only natural that you show a bit of emotion. And I think everyone in the garage feeds off the fact that they can see he is putting so much in emotionally. So yeah, I think he's doing brilliantly. And I know I know I'm a little bit susceptible to changing my kind of flights of
Oh,
fence.
no.
he's
No.
It was thick as a
No,
teenager. This
you
week.
you
have
know
to be
what?
first at the Maverick Vinales debriefs, Neil. I'm
But,
sorry.
You know, Maverick, you let me down this weekend. We didn't
he's
really
so
see the
fickle,
best of
Dave.
you.
He's so fickle.
But Johann Zarco, I'll tell you what, that guy, well, I'm going to put his poster up in my bedroom when I go home.
You're the kind of person who used to buy smash hits and then, kept on. They'd be
Used to.
taking down the poster of the latest pop star boy band and replacing it with another.
He's a Liverpool fan at the moment. Just wait until Chelsea start winning the league. If you swapping the red for blue, well, there we go. Hire and fire. I'm going to go first with the hire. I would like to give a nod to whoever designed this racetrack. I mean, it was fantastically simple and extremely wide and very fast. Back in the day, and they kind of carved it up. It's a Formula One facility, but it regularly produces fantastic motorcycle racing. Yeah. And Johann Zarco, we've just been talking about him, said in the press conference that there are parallels to Phillip Island with the fast-paced corners, and also the fact that the riders can carry different kind of speed through different lines. I mean, there was one moment, I think it was in the Moto2 race, in the final corner, we had 3 bikes abreast going into Vale and through the final section. I mean, we don't get that everywhere.
Or Marquez versus Morbidelli in that last section.
Yes, 100%. So, people complain about Silverstone. I mean, it is flat. There's no sort of significant undulations. You can say we're distant from the racing. We don't see that much. I think people who come to this race have to maybe lower their expectations a little bit, because you're not going to be in a fantastic valley setting like you are in Mugello or Red Bull Ring. But what you are going to get is probably a great contest.
Yeah, this is one of the great motorcycle tracks. I mean, there's in the pantheon of motorcycle tracks, there's Mugello and Phillip Island in a class of their own. Probably the old Assen used to be in there as well. Just below that, there's the fantastic tracks, places like Assen, and this is one of them, Silverstone. It's not quite Mugello, it's not quite Phillip Island, but it is so special and it is so good for motorcycle racing.
I would also like to quickly nominate Alex Marquez, because after that crash yesterday, winning the sprint, somewhat controversially, I think, getting a reprieve from that crash. I mean, he crashed out, the bike went into the fence. I think he was explaining to us afterwards in his debrief that the bike went off on a trailer, so he was panicking, thinking, do I need to take it back to the pit box? Because the rule is you need to be back there with your motorcycle after 5 minutes. And in the end, he gets back in it.
Yeah, no. That's not the rule. The rule is that if the race is red flagged within 3 laps, then the first race is completely scrapped, it's completely ignored, it's as if it never happened, and everyone gets to start again. If it had been for 4 laps, then yes, he would have had to have been back in his pit box. I think he has to take his
bollocks, Dave. 3 laps is a long time,
no,
especially on a track like this.
The thing is,
if you fall off on the first corner, why should you get a chance to have a go again if you fuck it up?
The reason for that is that because most of the crashes happen at the start. So basically, that is when all the bikes are closest together, and that's when you're most likely to get an incident through no fault of your own, where you're most likely to get multiple bikes, crashing because they are so close together. So it's basically it's to give everyone a fair chance. Now, if on lap 10 you fall off, then and they red flag it and they restart it, then probably it was your own fault, and probably it's up to you to try and get back to it. But at the start,
I think it should be 1 lap, not 3. I'm sorry, if you get taken out, yes, I can see the argument. But 3 laps.
I shall pass on your concerns to race direction.
Neil, who was your hire?
I'm going to go with the double-pronged hire, because we had a brilliant MotoGP race, but we had just a fantastic day of racing overall. Moto3 was brilliant. I haven't actually watched it. I'm going to come out now and tell you this, because it was the last race of the day. All the MotoGP debriefs were going on while Moto3 was happening, so I was just catching glances of what was happening. It looked like a crazy sort of madcap 14-rider battle.
They stopped the press conference in the middle to watch the last lap.
And then we saw we got the last lap in the press conference, but Jose Antonio Rueda did manage to become only the 3rd rider in Moto3 history to win a race from the back of the grid, joining Brad Binder in Jerez 2016 and David Alonso at this track 2 years ago, with just just a crazy ride. Last lap fight with Max Quiles. And I'm going to go with Rueda and Senna Agius, who won his first ever Grand Prix here this weekend in just the most incredible sort of finale to a race. One of the best Moto2 races I think we've ever seen. Brilliant five-rider fight at the front with Aaron Canet, David Alonso, and Agius going absolutely head-to-head. Diogo Moreira in there as well, and Ethan Guevara. And yeah, Agius read that final complex just right. You know, David Alonso was obviously going to have a go at Canet. He did. Canet responded. Canet messed it up a little bit, and Agius just was on hand behind. And I spoke to Jurgen Lingen's team manager afterwards, and they said, he got us out of jail because we completely messed up the gearing on the back. We got the gearing completely wrong with the wind. Senna was hopelessly outgunned on the long straight. So he was doing these miraculous things, near miraculous things through, some of the fast corners. He was brilliant into Copse Corner repeatedly. But you're just getting past, outgunned down the straights. And considering that, the fact that he still managed to win in those circumstances was remarkable. And yeah, he's been a little bit inconsistent this year, but he has now 3 podiums to his name, his first victory. And you have to remind yourself that this guy's 19 years old and he hasn't come through Moto3. He came through the European Moto2 Championship and stepped into this. So he is lacking. You know, we're coming to tracks like Silverstone where he's only been here once before. And you compare that to some of the guys he's racing with. Aaron Canet's now in his 5th or 6th year of Moto2. 6th year, I think. Yeah. And he's had a couple of years of Moto3 behind him. So, you know, he's given up 5, 6, 7 years of experience at certain tracks to his rivals. And he's already at this level. I think the future is very, very bright for Australian racing with someone like Senna Agius in this kind of form.
Yeah, that was the most arrogant thing ever.
And it was very generous of Manu Gonzalez to have that howler of a start and then also fall off to open the contest even more. But yeah, on Moto2, it's just a shame that Jake Dixon didn't qualify better for the home fans. I think he finished 9th.
11th.
Oh, 11th. Goodness. Right, okay.
Penalty after the race.
Yeah. Anyway. Dave, your higher?
My higher is Fabio Quartararo for all the reasons why I said
You're just feeling guilty now, aren't you?
Sympathy higher.
Yeah. Genuinely, I think he is the second best rider in the world at the moment behind Marc Marquez. Alex Marquez is riding fantastic, no question. But Fabio Quartararo is a very special rider, and we're able to see that. You're able to see it in his body language. He exudes joy when he rides. That's when you know that a rider is in his happy place and he's capable of doing something special. When he's capable of performing above and beyond what the bike is capable of, and it's just a joy to watch. He's fantastic.
Fire. I kind of dislike the connotation of this. We have to maybe find a different title. It sounds a bit harsh.
No, but the harsh is that's why we get paid the big bucks.
That's what the people want. Give them what they want.
My nomination this week or this Grand Prix is Enea Bastianini. He admitted in his debrief afterwards that this was the worst Grand Prix of his career. And it's just not turning around for the Italian. No. There was some green shoots, I think, at certain times in races, where he would always manage to sort of get some positivity out of Sunday, but then he can't qualify, and this was pretty turgid. I mean, it's to his credit that he comes along to media debriefs and he's extremely kind of
open,
and level-headed. He's smiley. He's like, I've just had the worst race of my career, guys, but it looks like he's just off to have an ice cream afterwards. He has that kind of demeanor.
Yeah, but that just means that he's resigned to it, and that's even worse.
Well, it's more like water off his back, and I do wonder, where does he go from here? Well, yeah, I mean, that's the obvious answer, but it's and also what kind of value of credibility do you have as a rider if you do it all on one motorbike but you can't sort out another one?
I'm sure the fact he was the double winner here last year, sprint and Sunday success. I'm sure that was a further kind of knife in his side. There you go. Thank you.
Your fire, Neil?
Well, my fire is going to be Frankie Morbidelli. Now, it's a slightly strange decision because he had actually a brilliant race coming through from 13th. Probably should have been on the podium. Had a great last lap fight with Marc. 3 times I think he had a go trying to get past Marc, but Marc held firm. So it was a good ride from him on a difficult day for Ducati. He also came out with 2 of the best quotes of the weekend when he was asked about Aleix Espargaro and what was going on. He said, well, it doesn't really matter because he won't be at the next couple of races. And then he was pressed a little bit further about it, and he just said, forget about it, which was very, very funny. But I'm going to fire him because on Friday he was obviously handed a penalty for holding up Bezzecchi, I think it was. He was dawdling on the racing line, slapped with a three-place grid penalty, understandably. And our colleague Jack Appleyard sort of was quite brave and said, Frankie, this has happened to you quite a lot in the past. Do you need to change your approach a little bit? And he said, well, this kind of thing happens all the time. It's just, it doesn't always happen on television, and therefore the stewards don't have the opportunity to see some of the indiscretions of the other riders in the field, which we thought, okay, not really sure about that. Then on Saturday, I turned up to his debrief, and he pointed at me and said, hey, did you see what happened with Maverick and Marco today? And I said, no, I didn't, Frankie. What happened? And he said, well, Maverick got in Marco's way, and where's his penalty? I'm going to need to wear a T-shirt which says, why always me? And I said, you do realize that it wasn't me that was poking you yesterday with that question? And he was like, no, I was talking to you. So the fact that Frankie mistook me for...
This is turning into a grudge match.
For Jack Appleyard.
Yeah, but Jack's half your height.
Exactly. That's right. Yeah, Jack Appleyard is literally about sort of 2'1", and Neil here is 18'7".
I love Jack, and he's a fantastic pit lane reporter. But to mistake Jack for me, come on, Frankie. What are you on, man? What are you on?
Yes.
So for that,
this is a grudge firing as well.
It really is.
This is a grudge firing. It got personal. Yeah, and then he sort of just give me a big high five afterwards, no hard feelings, man. I was like, mate, I didn't. It wasn't me that did this. What are you doing?
I can't wait to see what happens in Aragon. This is going to thunder on. I might wind him up even more and say, listen, Neil's written a piece about you saying you should lose your job. You're up for firing. Let's see what he says. Yeah.
I am firing the incredibly brilliant engineer who came up with the idea of ride height devices. It's amazing. It's a superb solution to the problem, which is not being able to control wheelie with electronics. It also gives you a lot more acceleration. It's a fantastic solution, and it's absolutely shit for the racing. It gives everyone a lot of work. All the reasons I've just gone through before, gives everyone lots of work. It's unnecessarily complicated. Also because, electronic suspension is banned. You could literally replace these things with electronic suspension, make everyone's life an awful lot easier. But we're afraid of electronic control because it just adds a lot more complexity, for a lot more cost for people to figure the algorithms out. But yeah, I'm going to be glad to see the back of ride height devices, and I'm terrified of what the person who came up with ride height devices is going to come up with to take their place.
You just want to know the reasons going but a certain bearded Italian gentleman in the paddock, don't you, Dave? That's what it's about. There's a grudge. Let's, just before we move on to the end of the podcast and give our grades for this Grand Prix, a reminder that we have the Alpine Stars Paddock Pass Podcast Fantasy League. And it must have been a good weekend for me because I put Marco Bezzecchi in my team early on. I think I even slotted him in at the end of Friday. I thought, there's potential there. And I must be somewhere, I was in the dark nether regions of our league, and I must have got some points. Has anyone got any information?
You got some points, Ed, yeah, but you're 2,381st in the Fantasy League. Steve still leads our lot, 211th. I'm in 218th, and Dave's in 1,435th. So, there's a bit of disparity there. The problem is everyone's got the same riders in their team.
Yes. Yeah. Marquez brothers, the Marquez, and
Zarco, Aldeguer. Yeah, exactly. But shout out to Laura team, Raul RT, and 8 Link, who are the top 3 in our current Paddock Pass podcast Alpine Stars League standings.
Yes, and we have. Also I mentioned for Alpine Stars, their tech airbags are fantastic.
Yes.
I use the Super Tech helmet actually just to ride around Barcelona. That's great as well. And, even the apparel, the T-shirts are cool. So just have a look at alpinestars.com if you're after for some new gear.
A quick shout out to a couple of our Patreons. We asked for their predictions coming into this weekend. No one predicted Marco Bezzecchi to win today's race. So a bit of a slap on the back for everyone that got involved in the voting. But one of the questions we did ask, what time will Dave finish his roundup on Saturday? Dave?
It was shortly after 2 a.m. on in the early hours of Sunday morning.
So shout out to Lynn Biggs and Yanni Valtonen, who correctly guessed 2 a.m. on Sunday morning.
Yes, indeed. And I was still a bit sort of hazy this morning because I jumped on my bike. I watched warm-up back in the apartment I'm staying, or the little cottage I'm staying, jumped on my bike, rode to the track, got to the track, opened the one of my panniers to get me bag with my laptop in, gazed into an empty void, realised that I'd left it back at the flat, and then I had to ride all the way back again and come back again. So it was very much a senior moment this morning.
Yeah.
Must be nice to come in at midday, Ad.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's
and the excuses he finds.
Yeah, it's not so nice staying up until 2 o'clock to get something finished.
Grades. I'm going to go for a 9 out of 10. I just want to see more people at this race. There were 99,400, something like that. That's the lowest crowd we've had, for 10 years at Silverstone at least.
No, there were 40,000 today. There were 40,000.
Hang on. In 2022, the official event figure was 100,000. So this was even lower than that. Yes, there's no British riders. Yes, people have this weird kind of, split divide or of opinion over Silverstone. But I think what we saw today means you should come along and enjoy it next year. And it's going to be in August, so it might be a bit warmer at least.
I'm also going to go for a 9, Ad, because there were lots of reasons for this not to be a great event, a resounding success. You mentioned the crowd, the weather, but just the sheer spectacle of today was sensational. I mean, it was the best ever racing I think we've had this year. 3 brilliant races with surprise results, and the standings kind of turned on their heads in some instances. And what is not to love? And also, made me think, is it really that important? Like, who cares if only 40,000 people show up on a Sunday when the racing's that good? Everyone that's going to be watching around the world on the television sets will be thrillingly entertained. And, maybe that's a better thing. I mean, is today a better, more memorable GP than going to, say, Valencia with 100,000 people, but the track's a bit crap, the racing's maybe a bit spread out? I mean, you're going to be remembering that a lot more than somewhere like Valencia, I think.
And this is the problem. I mean, because the UK is always Donington versus Silverstone. And Donington is fantastic for fans. It's a lovely place.
Well, Brands is the best, but...
Yeah, obviously, apart from Brands, but Brands is lethal. So let's not even think about going there on a MotoGP bike. Donington is fantastic to sit. It's a bit of a shitty track. It produces, or certainly, when you go back and look at the races, it produced incredibly processional races. World Superbikes as well, incredibly processional races. It's not good for racing at all. It's a very pleasant place to sort of visit and sit around. It feels natural. It sits more in the landscape. There's a lot more elevation. This place produces. I mean, Neil makes an excellent point. If you want for the sport, this place is much, much better because the racing it produces is just sensational, and it's a sensational motorcycle racing track. But as a visitor experience, it's terrible. And yet, Assen's flat as well, and yet they managed to get 110,000 people visiting. They managed to put the facilities, but then it's not quite as on as vast a scale.
I think when you come from the peak of Le Mans, where you have the crowd and also the atmosphere, you come here and you have the track, but you don't have the atmosphere.
Yeah.
And that's a scenario we might have in 2 weeks' time when we go to Aragon, which is very kind of vast as well and very open, and it's hard to get much of a vibe there too.
Yeah.
So that's the only thing that's lacking. That's why I wouldn't go full Spinal Tap and say 11 out of 10.
Yeah, but do British fans want to come to a MotoGP race? This is the other question. I mean, it was quite heartening because a lot of the people who were coming were families. I saw lots of people in their 20s, 30s, 40s with kids. It wasn't what you were sort of expecting because if you go to Sachsenring, which is packed, but it's mostly men of my age.
Who look quite a lot like you, actually, as well.
Some of them look exactly like me. One in particular.
And there's an exodus at 11 a.m. when they've all realised they've forgotten something and they go back and pick up their crap.
Exactly. No, but I mean,
they're getting to bed around 2:30 as well.
But it is true that it has been an aging sort of population, but and that is not the case here. It does seem to be a younger crowd. That at least is positive. But do Brits really want to come to a MotoGP race?
Well,
this is the thing.
Finish the podcast with your grade then, Dave.
My grade was a 9 because it was a fantastic race. It was exactly as both of you have said. It was a fantastic day of racing. It was a good event. It's a fantastic racetrack. Superb and unexpected. It would have been a 10 if Fabio had won. That would have been such a fairy tale. Also because there wouldn't have been a Ducati on the podium. But so many stories, so much to write about. Such a wonderful day.
Good shout.
999.
999. Thanks for listening, everybody. This has been the Paddock Pass podcast. Thanks also to rental.com and to Pole Position Travel. We'll be back for our Aragon preview in just over a week.